I'm going to ask Emma to come forward and share her inside information about what she saw, how we were treated from her superior at the time, and then ask Yang Zhenli, who has his perspective. Emma?
Thank you, Hillel, and thank you for having me. I think really the thread that has run through all the speeches we heard earlier is freedom of expression. Oh, sorry, is this?
Speak into the mic.
Oh, okay. The thread that we've really heard earlier in all the speeches is freedom of expression. Autocracy thrives in silence and fear. Unfortunately, the UN doesn't act like a democracy. It doesn't act like one of the member states that would be eligible for the Human Rights Council. Just very briefly, I think Hillel gave a good summary of my own case. I am the only ever sitting UN staff member to have a UN human rights mechanism write to the Secretary General demanding that my human rights be respected. The Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression at the time, David Kay, wrote a letter to the Secretary General saying I should be immediately protected against further retaliation and there should be an investigation of what I reported. The Secretary General's lawyers in court admitted that the Secretary General simply lied in his response and never initiated an investigation. Other examples, I took the UN to the only court that you can take the UN to, an internal employment tribunal. In 2019, my cases were heard. The judge had written 3 rulings. He published one. He found that the Secretary General in person, Antonio Guterres, had unilaterally decided not to apply UN rules to my case. The next day, pretty much, the judge goes into work and is told he is now functus officio. The General Assembly has voted to remove him. The General Assembly, of course, was not provided with adequate information, and he was replaced by a Portuguese judge who previously worked under Prime Minister Antonio Guterres. There was one meeting held on the situation of Uyghurs in the UN. It was on the 12th of May 2021. The meeting moved to the Q&A phase. I was participating remotely from Lausanne. There's a knock on my door. It is armed Swiss police sent at the behest of the UN to stop me from speaking at a meeting. Now, I am not comparing in any way. I am not the victim of this story. The victims are the people whose names were handed over when armed police came to my home. They were Swiss, not Chinese. I knew I was fine. I was able to shout at them when they entered my home illegally. They eventually left. The Swiss government has said I cannot sue them because the UN has immunity. And the UN uses that immunity to silence critics. UN Watch is just about the only organisation with a mandate to actually look at how the UN itself is operating. And the UN does not like being criticised. When I joined the UN in 2012, it was about my second staff meeting in the Human Rights Council branch led by Eric Tistounet. And the then NGO liaison officer was talking about plans for the next session of the council. And Eric immediately brought up UN Watch. And he said, well, we don't want to be too kind to UN Watch. A bit strange, maybe something happened in the previous session. This became a pattern. I have never heard Eric Tistounet refer to any other NGO in a meeting in the terms that he uses to refer to UN Watch. In January 2013, I became the NGO liaison myself. So I'm now in charge of the list of speakers, putting in the rooms, making sure that they're accurate, etc. Every list of speakers that had UN Watch on it had to be delivered to Eric's office. No other NGO was subject to this treatment. Eric would then suggest moving UN Watch down, off, or to some embarrassing point in a list. I used to tell Eric that if he wanted to do that, he'd have to do it himself, print out the list and take it into room 20. This was problematic. There were also problems of reports of people being retaliated against by the Chinese government prior to coming. At the time, I didn't realise that it was because the UN was handing over the names. So I proposed that we make a computerised system. And I designed the computerised system. I am qualified to do so. I have a degree in mathematics from the University of Cambridge. So when I talk about this algorithm, I'm talking about it in an accurate manner. The algorithm that sets up the list of speakers, some of the debates are by priority, other debates are by pure order of sign-up. But you can actually look at the debates in a final UN Human Rights Council session and figure out what the order of sign-up was, and therefore if the other lists are accurate. Hillel asked me to do this for the 50th session, where he mentioned that UN Watch didn't get a single interactive dialogue, so none of the debates directly with the officials. And I did. That result was not generated by the algorithm. You can look at the debates under something called Universal Periodic Review. You can see exactly what order the different NGOs signed up in. The order is consistent across 10 lists. That is the order of sign-up. You can then look at the interactive dialogues. And UN Watch's first choice was the interactive dialogue with the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territories. And UN Watch was on that list when it was generated by the algorithm. They were not on that list. When it was published, they did not get a place to speak in the council. As I said, that is not unusual. When I spoke to my predecessors in the role of NGO liaison, one of whom was inciting violence against Hillel in this email exchange to which he referred, she suggested that security should rough up Hillel outside the room. They all told me that they just basically obeyed Eric when he gave these instructions. That it's easier to just move UN Watch down or off the list. Eric hates Hillel, just accept it. Do it. Different rules are applied to UN Watch written statements. The complaints that you got, those are usually instructions from Eric. Send out something saying he's defaming someone, and I would be like, he doesn't mention anyone in this statement, like, who's he defaming? No, we have to say Hillel is defaming people. I used to write the language that was given to the president on the podium, and Eric would require more and more visceral language that we could use when it was UN Watch. There's a normal folder for every other NGO. There's literally a page in there for UN Watch. And you can watch online. You know, Hillel gives a speech where he mentions nobody. And he's usually not, well, very interrupted by states a fair amount as well, but it's very rare for the president of the council to interrupt an NGO. I've pretty much only seen it when Hillel speaks. So there's moving them down as the speakers, deliberately interrupting the podium. Another thing is there's a button on the podium, and the job of the person doing NGOs is as soon as there's a point of order, you press the button to make sure that the NGO can finish their speech. Not for UN Watch. Eric would appear behind me often on the podium to stop me pressing that button. I didn't just sort of sit there watching all this happen. I did make complaints internally in the UN. I didn't announce to Hillel that I was doing so, but I complained about this in 2013 and 2015 to the Investigations Division of the United Nations, and I was told that no investigation would be conducted. And I was also told that I did not have standing myself to challenge that before the UN's Employment Tribunal because it's an employment tribunal and Hillel is not an employee. I complained about it again in a complaint that I made to the Secretary General in 2019. In that case, I had just seen on the UN Watch website that one of the censored statements concerned China and concerned Hillel being interrupted by the Chinese delegation. And that was also relevant to my case against Mr. Tistounet for this policy of handing over names of Chinese dissidents to the Chinese government. And the Secretary General, as ever, ignored my complaint. So it isn't that the UN doesn't know this is happening. The UN is completely aware that this is happening. It's that the UN does not care about freedom of expression when it is applied against the UN itself. And the only way of holding the UN to account is precisely this kind of meeting and to make the issue public. Let's give it a bit of fresh air.
Thank you, Emma, for your courage. For many years, myself and my colleagues, we knew that they were doing stuff, but to actually have the person who was behind the podium watching it in action, hearing the instructions, it's very powerful, and I don't think they can hide anymore. We're hoping that the United States government, other democracies, including lawmakers, members of Congress, will speak out, will demand that the Secretary General take action, and that's what we'll be appealing to this week if you want to help please ask your member of Congress, your representative, to speak out and demand an investigation and to restore the rights of UN Watch to speak and to stop the censorship.